Is Qinduo Xu, fellow with the Pangoal Institution and host of CGTN's Dialogue Weekend. Good morning, Qinduo. Always good to see you.
Good evening, Gerald.
Hello. So, over the past 50 years, China has become a prominent voice and player at the UN. Where do you see it making the greatest difference, from the Security Council to pressing issues such as climate change, the coronavirus vaccine?
Well, I would say China's contribution or China's participation in the UN system grows along with the Chinese growth, in particular, over the past 40 plus years. As you mentioned rightly, China used to be a receiver in terms of international aid from, for example, World Bank, or receiver from the UN or different kinds of assistance. And now China is the second, contributor of the UN funding and the largest contributor for the peacekeepers, for example. And also China is contributing to the development of the fellow developing countries. So that's a great change. I would say mostly because of, on one hand, China's own development. On the other hand, China is a faithful believer and practitioner of this multilateralism, and which is centered at the UN.
And Qinduo, really these days, how united really are the United Nations? Many of the issues seem to be a split between developed and developing nations, with China seen as the leader against the Western Bloc, perhaps.
There's a view, Gerald, from Chinese point of view, there's a UN-centered international system should be respected because that's the most authoritative organ in terms of true multilateralism and international order that will be based on this international law. And when UN was established since at the end of Second World War, the purpose and principles and the UN Charter are the fundamental, cornerstone in terms of peace and stability. So for China, UN is the most important international body. China has trust, China respects, China upholds the rule of the international rule of the UN. The thing is, not every, I would say, developed world in particular. I was asked actually once, people would say, if you look at the international bodies, including the UN, their role is somehow limited because, for example, they cannot resolve the conflicts in Afghanistan. They cannot resolve the issue. They cannot even launch a war in Iraq or somewhere else. So ultimately, you have to rely on the rich world or developed world to solve the problems. I think that's true. That's at the same time, that's untrue. You have to involve most of the countries or all of the countries around the world to truly solve a problem, for example, climate change and also the COVID-19, for example. If we want to deal with that, every country, every region has to be involved to really eradicate this virus. You cannot rely on one country or two countries, however powerful they are, like the US or China. So they have to work together. I think, with that being said, I agree in terms of the wealth, of course, in terms of technology, the developed countries, probably they are in a leading position. They are in an advantageous position. But developing countries, we can say, in particular, emerging economies like China, India, South Africa, Russia, Brazil, etc., Argentina, Turkey, they are rising quickly. So I think we should look at the issue also, into the future as it develops, instead of as something that is static.
Right, so seeing that argument about, the UN perhaps being outdated of an institution, how do you see China's role for the next 50 years with the UN?
I would imagine, there's a growing role for China to play under the UN system or within the UN system, and in particular, working together with the majority of developing countries, I would say. We do see there are, different ideas in terms of human rights, for example, in terms of how to resolve a particular hotspots, for example, in Afghanistan. People do have different ideas. But still, I think, as China grows, if we want to maintain the current international order. I think the rich world, which occupies or dominates today's basically international bodies, including the UN, we should do some reforms, necessary reforms, to adopt the growing presence, growing important, for example, like countries China, India, for example, or Russia. So in that sense, by accommodating to the reality, and then the current international system will continue to be effective and to be obviously relevant, more relevant to every country in the world. In that sense, China is all for that. Obviously, China is going to play increasingly active role in that direction.